We've seen more details emerge just in the last few weeks around these January 6th committee hearings. Does any of that surprise you, what you've heard? Have you been listening to those?
I have not been watching them closely. I saw most of the first one, but on one hand it's surprising, on the other hand it's not. Like you reach the point where nothing surprises you, but I'm still baffled by the fact that so many Americans still follow the president and believe him despite all that we've heard over 4+ years now.
Does it make you even more concerned that he would do whatever it takes to stay in power?
Well, he would do whatever it takes to stay in power. That was my concern, certainly leading up to the election in November 20. And I go back to folks who say, well, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you resign? I wanted to be there at that point in time so that the military wasn't used to either influence the election or do something nefarious after the fact. That became my goal in June of 2020.
You kind of reference this, but you do talk about your concern that the U.S. military would be used in the election in some capacity. How close do you think we got to Trump actually seizing voting machines? Do you think he would have used the military to instigate a coup?
And I was very concerned that somebody from the White House, even the president, might reach into the National Guard, either directly or through the states, and try to call them out for one reason or another. So, look, there was enough concern out there by myself, and based on what I was seeing at the White House, that I wanted to make sure that, again, that I was there in place, that I was a circuit breaker, and that I could stop it. Did I think that at that point in time, that January 6th would be impossible? No, I did not see that coming.
Do you think that President Trump instigated the mob to go to the Capitol on January 6th?
Well, I think he did, in a sense that he summoned them for the weeks prior. He said, come to D.C. on January 6th. It's going to be wild or something like that. He undermined the election for nearly 2 months at that point in time, created the big lie. He, stirred them up that morning. So, yeah, of course I think he bears responsibility for that. And more of this is coming out now in these hearings that are up there. But look, I said at the time, I sent out a memo the day after June 1st to all of DOD. And I said, look, we have a duty to defend Americans' constitutional rights to peacefully assemble and protest. Now, we have a role in law and order as well, supporting civilian enforcement when they need it, if they can't handle it. But first and foremost, we are an apolitical body, duty-bound to live up to our oath, and that means guaranteeing Americans' rights, beginning with the First Amendment.
You sort of lay out as a turning point is that June 1st, 2020 protest. You wrote that the game had changed. I wondered about former President Trump's sense of history, of propriety, and of his oath to the Constitution. Why not speak out then about your concerns about him?
So often when we faced a difficult situation, the president would turn to the military to solve the problem. Now, of course, there are times overseas when you have to do that. There are times when you don't. But here at home, when it was, the border wall, it's not getting done by the Department of Homeland Security. Who do you go to? Go to the military. The Corps of Engineers will build it. If it's COVID response, who do you go to? The military. If it's warp speed, the military. So too often the president it seemed his first inclination was to go to the military option or use the military instrument. But to your specific question, so look, folks ask this all the time, is why not resign now, right? It's a fair question.
Or at least inform the American public sooner.
Well, how do you inform the American public sooner?
You could have spoken from the Pentagon podium, right, and said, I think that this was a misuse of the military, or Millie and I feel duped was something you had said in the book. Why not speak out more forcefully?
So I go to the podium on June 3rd and, of course, obviously publicly rebuke the president and say that I don't support invocation of the Insurrection Act. But I would have been fired immediately. It's that simple. Everyone. I thought that given my oath to the Constitution, that I was better off there blunting bad ideas and stopping outlandish ones and using that position and to get us to the election rather than going out, standing up and saying these things, getting a 48 hours news blitz. And then, as we saw in November when I was fired, you would have had real Trump loyalists in position running DOD for 6, 7, 8 months.
You write after the June 1st incident that you are worried for our democracy at that point. Having served as Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense for about a year, I had seen many red flags, many warnings, and many inconsistencies. The former president seems to be indicating that he is going to run for president again. What do the American people need to know?
I don't think he's fit for office. I've said so publicly as well. I think public servants have to put country first, and he put his reelection, he put himself first above everything else. And I'm a Reagan Republican, by the way. You have to give President Trump his credit. He advanced traditional Republican policy objectives, and he had success on them, rebuilding the military, lowering taxes, deregulation, conservative judges on the bench. You can go on and on and on. But I would say to my fellow Republicans is, look, you can get that with any number of candidates who likely will emerge after the midterms. You can get that without the coarseness, without the divisiveness, without all the other baggage that Donald Trump brought along. Because at the end of the day, we need a leader who will unify the people. And for the party, we need a leader who can win elections. And because if you don't win elections, it doesn't matter what great policy ideas you have. You will not be able to advance them. So that would be and has been my argument to the American people and to the Republican Party in particular.
So you would not vote for him again if he ran for president?
Not at all.
What are you going to do otherwise, in addition to that, to prevent someone that you see as a threat, Donald Trump, to becoming president again? Will you campaign for someone that you think is a better candidate?
Yeah, well, look, I'm waiting to see what happens after the midterms when Republicans start announcing their candidacy. And look, if I find somebody that has, I believe, is independent and principled and can unify us and win elections, and certainly I'll get behind that candidate. Otherwise, I'll continue to speak out, doing interviews like this, and as I speak around the country. But look, I think that's an important role for me as a member of the cabinet to do those types of things and trying to address these issues head on.
Has Trump been held accountable for anything?
Only in a political sense, only to the degree that he's lost supporters and people who believe in him. And, you saw his base erode over time, and it certainly dropped off considerably after the election. And then again, really so after January 6th. So politically, yes, to some degree, but I can't ascertain that. That's the challenge with our system. And that's what they have to figure out. What are the next steps here?
One of the things that I thought was more interesting that you talk about kind of in a lot of detail in your book is the withdrawal from Afghanistan. The deal that was made with Pompeo and the Taliban. You talk some about that canceled visit to the White House that President Trump wanted to host. We saw what happened in August of 2021, almost a year ago now, when the U.S. finally had a full withdrawal. What did you make of that moment? And do you think that what happened with the deal that was struck during the Trump years contributed to such a messy withdrawal from that country?
Well, the short answer is not necessarily so. I think the problem was with both President Biden and President Trump is they wanted to get out no matter what. So when you fast forward to October of 2020, this is when the National Security Advisor comes out and says, we're going to get U.S. troops home by Christmas or by the end of the year. President Trump doubles down and says, no, by Christmas, which is at that point is 60, 70 days away. And I pulled my team together, both military and civilian, and I said, look, what do you recommend? I know what I think, but I want to hear what you recommend first. And to a person, they said, no, we should stick to conditions based, hold at 4,500 troops, and make the Taliban live up to their end of the deal. That was exactly my point of view. I wrote a classified memo to the president outlining that and said I do not support a precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan, but the president persisted nonetheless. And then, of course, he leaves office, and President Biden pursues what I would call a precipitous withdrawal. Not as quickly as Trump would have pursued, but in my view, what we should have done, and that's why I say up front, not necessarily so, what we should have done is gone back and said to the Taliban, look, we're living up to our end of the agreement, you're not living up to yours. So until you sit down with the Afghan government and begin serious negotiations, and until you show some distance between yourself and al-Qaeda, we're going to keep our forces in the country. And if you still don't comply, we're going to start inflicting violence upon you. I would have pursued that option first before a hasty withdrawal. And I'm not saying it would have been successful, but it was worth trying before we rushed out of that country. And what we saw in August of 2021 was just abysmal. It was atrocious. It hurt America's standing in the world. It hurt our reputation. We left Americans behind. We left Afghans behind. So it was quite sad to see.
I'm Michael Learmonth, editor-in-chief of Vice News. Too often, traditional news outlets shy away from the real stories and experiences of those living through global conflicts. Not Vice News. Our reporters are on the ground, fearlessly covering the human stories that shape our world. You and millions of others can continue to read, watch, and listen to Vice News for free. but we hope you'll consider making a one-time or ongoing contribution of any size at vice.com/contribute. Every contribution, no matter how big or small, helps support the journalism Vice News brings to you every day. Thank you.